When dealing with a falsehood, you're faced with two options. You can accept it or you can reject it. The basis upon which we take one of these actions is a product of our critical thinking capabilities and a desire to know what is true instead of confirming our bias. A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes. On Brainstorm, we choose the hard truths over the comforting lies. Reason, compassion, skepticism. This is the Brainstorm Podcast.
All right. To those listening live or to our patrons, welcome back. For those listening weekly, welcome to the Shift to Reason Radio, the Brainstorm production where we take current events and important skeptical topics and try to analyze them critically. Today is May 25th, 2018. I'm Cory, and I'm still joined by Brandon.
Hello.
Rene.
Hello.
Lisa.
Hi.
And, of course, the always amazing Dave.
Still here.
All right. So let's jump right into the Woo Report.
I'm not a scientist, but if I can tell you your science sucks, then your science really sucks.
That just makes no fucking sense. I mean, it's just bullshit. Fuck.
All right. Rene, you're up.
Aliens.
Is it really?
Yeah. Apparently, there's a theory going around is that the reason why the U.S. went to war in Iraq wasn't for oil or revenge on Saddam Hussein or weapons of mass destruction. It was Stargates. Stargates.
They're a real thing.
I love this theory.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
I love that show.
See, I'm weird is that I love Ancient Aliens. Like, if I'm at home on Friday night when it's on, I will sit and watch it.
Nice.
I you know what? It's total bullshit, but I am so entertained by the mental gymnastics that they do to connect the dots. It's great.
It's like when you used to listen to Alex Jones, but now this is still not dangerous.
Yeah, no. As far as I know, there isn't. There's probably people that believe it, but they're not phoning in with even crazier stories.
Right.
You know,
they're not going to be doing bad things.
Aliens took my car.
Yeah, hopefully they're not going to be doing bad things. But so it boils down to is there's just enough history. Like the premise is that there is like Iran, Iraq, Syria. It was all like what they call the cradle of civilization, because that's where like the Assyrians and the Sumerians, they all lived there, and there's oldest civilizations on Earth. It was like the beginnings of written language was there, and so supposedly, Saddam Hussein in the 80s started doing excavations in the ziggurat of Ur, which is the ziggurat, which is this giant. I think it's a step pyramid. Like, it's just huge. Anyway, so the whole theory is that he had discovered a Stargate in this ziggurat, and so like So apparently the Brits have been in there before in the 1920s, and you know
they had a Stargate too.
They found the original. They found the original Stargate, and there's supposed to be pictures. I found that on the link. There's a link in the story where it takes you to, I think, and I was blown away that it was a CNN website, but it's this whole article about how they discovered this Stargate, which looked a lot like the Stargate from the movie and the TV shows. You know, the big round.
Right. It's remarkably coincidental.
Yeah. And that's probably, the thing is, that's probably where they got the whole premise from, but, you know. And, anyway, so he started supposedly, excavating the ziggurat. He supposedly found, a Stargate, and this is why the Americans went into Iraq, because to make sure that they could control that technology. And this is also why there's such a push to be involved in Syria and now maybe attack Iran, because they're worried that there's other Stargates in these other places.
Okay.
Yeah. Really, that's all it is. It's just.
I want this to be true.
Yeah, me too.
You know, like
Sounds cool.
I mean, it's the basis behind the whole ancient astronaut theory. Is that the reason why these ancient civilizations were able to advance so far was because, like, they say that the Anunnaki, which were worshipped as gods by the Sumerians, they weren't gods. They were aliens who came down and gave them technology which allowed them to advance. And that's how civilization got started, was because of aliens.
Right.
And so that's what this ancient technology is, and the Americans want to control it, and, you know, and yeah.
Well, why wouldn't they?
Why wouldn't they? It's apparently as real as Saddam Hussein having weapons of mass destruction.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering, like, so what's the deal with this circle thing that was covered in the news? Like, do they have like a genuine archaeological explanation for it?
Not really. It's all just theory that it creates wormholes.
Okay. Interesting.
Just because it's round.
It's a round thing,
Well,
so it must be a wormhole.
It's just an extension of like the ancient alien theory, which is there's a couple writers that have done it. It says in the article, which I can't find it right now, but I know Eric von Däniken wrote Chariot of the Gods, which is kind of the basis behind the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And it's kind of the start of the whole ancient alien astronaut theory. And then there's another guy, which his last name started with an S. I can't seem to find it right now. But yeah, he continued writing it. And like, of course, both of them have been discredited as, you know, pseudo history and pseudoscience
Right.
and whatever else. So.
Because many of the things they say actually contradict what.
Well, it's so hard to connect. Like, I mean, they take giant leaps of logic with ancient texts, like,
Right.
you know, and I've seen it connected, like anything from the Bible, like, I'm trying to think of it, the story of, one of the prophets going to heaven. Well, that's obviously, the chariot of fire that's obviously like a rocket ship or whatever, you know, and this, there we go. Zachariah Stitchin. That was the author I was looking for. Anyway, so that's what it's this idea that human beings can't possibly have built these amazing things. They had to have had extraterrestrial help.
Now, I mean, maybe this is a bit off topic, but my brother used to argue against evolution by saying that humans needed help to expand their brains enough to have the civilizations that we have. Is that something that touches onto this?
There is, I've seen that on TV. I can't remember the exact example, but there is part of the ancient astronaut theory is that human beings is a fucking genetic experiment by space aliens.
Interesting.
The missing link is where they tinkered with the DNA and boom, monkey, boom, human.
So they started with humans and then did raccoons?
No, you're thinking Guardians of the Galaxy. Let's not get silly here. Let's not get ridiculous.
I'm so sorry.
Tree people aren't a thing.
Yeah.
You know what gives some validity to not validity, but I should say some like strength to people's crazy theories is that because the U.S. government is so nefarious and so top secret sometimes in some of the things they do,
right? Then
you can like start jumping to like, oh well, then of course they would be willing to do something like this, and they would be. Don't get me wrong.
Yes, there's actually a Stargate in the middle of the desert.
If there was such a thing, they probably would behave in very strange ways. But so then you get clouded because you're kind of like, well, you're right. Look at all this declassified stuff we found out.
Well, that's just it. Is they do just enough shady shit that make you go, maybe.
Well, actually, this is kind of on topic, but there was a podcast I listened to recently. I can't remember what it was, but they were talking to somebody who like knew the whole history of like CIA and technology. And they were kind of talking about how there's all this evidence, very, very clear evidence that they were always ahead technologically speaking, like the States. And they always reveal things much later in their actual technological development, right? Like they gave an example of a certain fighter jet that became released, you know, I don't know if it was 80s or 90s or something, when they actually had that tech. You found out later through declassified documents, they had that tech for decades, and they just made it public at that point. So, and that's a real thing. Like, that's not, there's no conspiracy theory needed to get to that point, because they've admitted it. But it's, but then going past that and saying, where did that come from? You know, what does that mean? Like, those kinds of questions are different.
You look at the stealth, was it
F-117 Nighthawk? The
stealth bombers, you know, like, they had them in the 60s, and then
exactly right.
You know.
So the CNN article, that's a little bit over the top. Like,
for CNN,
it's kind of like, it's almost like a blog post on a CNN blog.
Yeah, like the iReport.
Yeah, which is interesting. Like, it's definitely written. It's written by somebody who's, what was their username? Galactic T.
Oh,
so it's maybe not necessarily the best.
Maybe not totally truthful. You know, like, you may be a little bit of tinfoil on the hat. On the head.
Somewhere I was just scrolling through it, and there definitely was a line that said, "This is not a conspiracy."
Oh yeah.
So now you know. Now you're sure. Somebody said.
They strongly denied it, so it's not a conspiracy.
It makes for good television.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, perfect.
It's like when Destin tells you, I'm not just trying to get you to buy the diamond coat.
Right, yeah, that's right. Sure, buddy.
Mm-hmm. I have it on my own car. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you only have it on your own car, so you can say that.
And how do we know for sure? I mean, we don't.
We would never know.
We'll never know.
And he'll never hear this, because I bet he doesn't even listen anymore.
Let's hire Bob to look into this. We'll investigate.
That's an insult to Bob. He's doing more important things.
He's doing much higher work than this.
Yeah.
But yeah, so long story short, yeah, there are crazy people. Because, like, I actually tried to watch some of the YouTube videos that they linked in the article. The first two were removed. The links are dead.
Oh, they're super legitimate.
Oh, yeah. So, although I did watch the one where they had a little 5-minute blurb from the History Channel, like Ancient Aliens, talking about.
Nice.
Because, you know, the Americans, when they invaded Iraq, they did send a lot of troops to protect the ziggurat. There was a lot of troops sent there.
Interesting.
So, like, that's the greatest thing about these things, is that there's just that smidgen of truth where you go, huh.
Now, was it to protect it was literally like in documents to protect the ziggurat, or was it something else significant in the area that happened to be in the neighborhood of the ziggurat?
Well, realistically, and I'm just kind of talking on my ass on this one, but realistically, they probably sent a bunch of troops there to protect the ziggurat, because it is a major historical relic. And there was so much looting after the invasion of Iraq, it wasn't even funny.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Funny.
Yeah, just massive, like I don't know how many different museums in Iraq were just sacked, and so much stuff went onto the black market. Like, that's probably why the Americans went, no, you lock that place down, because.
Well, yeah, we talked about that last time about Chick-fil-A and what this
Chick-fil-A?
Filet. Sorry.
It was Hobby Lobby.
Right, sorry.
Right.
And their artifact trade.
Yeah. That's probably the actual mundane explanation, but it does look a little suspicious that all of a sudden, okay, everyone, protect this ancient building, that might have a Stargate in it.
First of all, it's not in the ziggurat anymore. It's in Colorado.
Yeah.
There is a BC.
Are you kidding me? It's in Colorado?
Yeah, there's a BC 303 over our heads right now.
Wait, when did they move it to Colorado?
Sometime in
season 1.
No, but honestly, because in Stargate SG-1, that's where the base is in Colorado.
Right, of course.
That's why I said that.
That's why we were making fun of.
Okay, so but actually, like, it was in Colorado.
No.
Oh, okay. I was like, that's ridiculous.
That would be somebody's prank in the military. It's like, you know what? We're storing this in our base in Colorado.
Yeah, at the same base as they have on the show.
That will go crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we can end that story there. Lisa, what do you have? Something less silly, I think.
Well,
it's
all
silly.
woo, so
Still
I mean, what do you
silly.
want?
Yeah.
So this is on a blog called Skeptical Raptor. This dude doesn't, or dudette, I guess, I don't know if it's a man or woman, doesn't identify themselves by name. They say they have a background in biology, both undergraduate and graduate level, and particularly endocrinology. So this is an article about another article they found that said that marijuana treats vaccine averse events. And yeah. So basically, apparently there was a recent article that says marijuana treats adverse events from vaccines. Interesting. The way that it's summarized is kind of interesting because it starts with the fact that, in fact, there's not a lot of evidence that marijuana does a whole lot of good for anything in medicine. So, for example, it's supposed to, there's no robust evidence that marijuana can cure or prevent cancer. Apparently, there's research that indicates that secondhand marijuana smoke may actually increase the risk of cancer, but there are evidence for 3 uses of cannabis that there's actual evidence for. Number 1 is for the treatment of chronic pain in adults using all forms of cannabis, as antiemetics, anti-nausea, in the treatment of chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting in the form of oral cannabinoids, and for improving patient-reported multiple sclerosis spasticity symptoms, oral cannabinoids. So outside of those 3 uses, there's no evidence that marijuana does anything for you, basically.
Wasn't there moderate evidence for sleep apnea? Isn't that one thing too?
I don't know, Dave. I'm only reading this thing.
It's not in this article, though.
It's not in the article, and I'm not an expert in the uses of marijuana.
Well, why not?
I'm sorry. I'm the worst.
Why didn't you do an entire doctorate on this while we were...
Yeah. You had a few days.
I should have done that. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm the worst. Basically,
Lisa actually did more work than I did this week.
Very hard to do as little work as I do. But anyways, basically, this article is criticizing, this blog post, whatever, most myths that around the effects of cannabis use. They say that part of it is a result of attempting to get more pro-marijuana laws, and part of it is just an attempt to justify marijuana use. Dave. And it's for my sleep apnea, baby.
I'm not naive to the fact that it's not healthy. I just don't think it's any worse than alcohol.
I just want to bother you, Dave.
That's my theory. Anyway, or not theory. My view. Anyway,
but most of it arises from a complete misunderstanding of how evidence-based medicine works and drawing conclusions from the weakest scientific studies that look at marijuana use. So, and it's interesting because this article, I think this person must work in a pharmaceutical company or something, because specifically said several times in the article, if we do find some component of cannabis has an effect on one of the 200 or more types of cancer, for example, big pharma is going to be your friend. So they say this many times that if we find a good effect from marijuana, you're not going to want to go and buy a joint from the guy in the alley. You're going to want big pharma to extract whatever active ingredient that is, make it as potent as it needs to be to actually have an effect, and deliver it in a consistent way at a drugstore.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yep.
I love how that runs counter to the whole big pharma has a.
But if I smoke it will cure my cancer.
Well, and the funny thing, I think like they're trying to change the connotation of big pharma, right? That's, it has such a negative connotation. Well, maybe it can be positive because they're doing research and providing legitimate medications.
Well, Shoppers is going all in on marijuana, so they'll be the big pharma.
Are they?
Oh yeah, they've been planning for the last year and a half.
That's funny. I didn't
going
know that.
going all in. Yeah.
So it's well regulated.
This is an article.
Big pharma Shoppers.
So the article with respect to the using pot to improve the symptoms of vaccines or the whatever bad effects from vaccines. Apparently it was written in Cannabis, a website that focuses on buying weed and promoting the rubbish about medical effects of consuming it. Mm-hmm. So the article is called How Cannabis Helps with Vaccine Side Effects. Axe the Vax? ? Cannabis is a treatment for vaccine effects. So right away you can see that it's going to be an anti-vaccine article. So first of all, they say, quote, in fact, some cases are so extreme that vaccinations are now a suspected cause for autism in children. The vaccine autism debate has been a burning issue for many years now, although the CDC denies these links. So the only debate so then they say, well, let's clarify. The only debate is a public one where one side, without a femtogram of scientific or clinical evidence, claims that vaccines cause autism, while the overwhelming majority of scientists disagree. So there's not really a debate. The article also states, quote, cannabis is good. This is the anti-vax article states, cannabis is good for you, while vaccines can have some pretty serious side effects, even though they are both meant and able to protect you from diseases. Is cannabis good for you? Unless you have one of the 3 conditions mentioned above, there is no demonstrable evidence that it is, quote, good for you, unless, of course, you like getting high. And on the other hand, there is good evidence that it may not be good for you, especially when smoked. So, there's one more quote from the anti-vax article. But still, there have been at least thousands of cases which prove that vaccines may have side effects that are harmful for your health. The measles vaccine alone has been reported to cause brain inflammation, seizures, pancreatitis, anaphylaxis, and arthritis. It doesn't stop there. There are even cases of children who have died after receiving vaccines. So then there's a link to the, quote, National Vaccine Information Center, which is one of the most prominent and misinformed anti-vaccine groups out there. So this blog poster here, the Skeptical Raptor, clarifies that there is no medical evidence that any child has died after receiving vaccines going back 30 years. So, of course, technically, you have to be informed of possible rare side effects when you get a vaccine, but it's very, 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 very rare, and the benefits of getting a vaccine generally vastly outweigh the potential risks.
Yeah. I feel
yeah?
I was going to say, I feel like they're pulling their statistics from the problem that people die after having vaccines, but not because of vaccines.
I don't even think it's even that well researched. I think even that would be giving them too much credit.
It's like they're hit by a car going across the street from the doctor's office after getting vaccines.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're apparently the article tells a story about a child who contracted epilepsy after routine vaccination. So there's no evidence for that possibility.
I don't think that's how that works.
Yeah. No, it's not. And then apparently the article says that vaccines can trigger a reaction in the brain, causing the immune system to attack tissues, thus leading to encephalitis. So
I don't think that's how that works.
Yeah. So encephalitis is an inflammation in the tissue or the fluid between your brain and your skull. That's what that kid whose parents are being charged with not providing the necessities of life died of.
Right.
So you can get acute encephalitis from
the measles.
And the MMR vaccine prevents that. So that's sort of interesting. They list a few other forms of encephalitis. Can marijuana treat encephalitis? Well, there is some mouse research that shows a reduction in brain swelling, but that's about all we know. But in order to get that level of cannabidiol into your bloodstream, you would have to smoke 1,000 joints a day.
Yeah.
I don't have that sort of time.
Yeah. Or lungs, probably.
No,
so it's just kind of
definitely
goofy.
going to lead to lung cancer, isn't it?
Maybe. So, yeah. So again, kind of coming back to big pharma possibly being able to, if there were a link there, being able to help, but there's no evidence for that. So the blogger actually recommends that if you or your child comes down with encephalitis, that you take them to a hospital. Yeah.
Go figure.
There you go.
Not to your naturopath.
Their vaccines are extremely safe. There are sometimes minor and very rarely serious side effects, but giving your child cannabis to treat these minor and serious adverse effects just does not make sense.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I don't know. Anti-vaxxers really,
I stand by my statement from a few episodes ago. It's not in living memory for them anymore. They never had to suffer through it personally, so it's not a thing to them.
Yeah. Very odd.
If Jenny McCarthy had polio, I'm pretty sure her stance on that vaccine would be a little different.
Probably. Yeah, probably. Okay, we're going to go into fuck you, and then we're going to do Brandon's story.
Still waiting on that heifer, Julio. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. You're cool. And fuck you, I'm out.
All right, so my article this week is on the NFL's change in their player policy. As people, at least a few of our listeners are going to be aware, Colin Kaepernick has been protesting police brutality and discrimination in the States since 2016 by kneeling during the national anthem. And, of course, the exact right response was the result. Or not. Now, he'd been going on doing this for 2 years. But the NFL kind of wasn't really sure what they're going to do about it. So they came out with a new policy. You're allowed to protest, and by protest, they mean sit in the locker room and don't be seen protesting. And the penalty is going to be team fines. The league is not actually allowed to fine players for this, apparently, but they are allowed to fine teams. So essentially, the league is on the side of, we don't want to see your protest, and we're just going to make it go away. Of course, for me, the ideal response would be to see entire teams hit the locker room in protest. That might actually be significant enough to be notable. But I just wanted to share something, a stream of tweets on the subject by @Eaton. Starts with, really struck by the fact that Kaepernick's ongoing silent, peaceful protest was deeply rage-inducingly unacceptable to white America. I mean, it was literally an example of everything that Black America was told that protests must be to be acceptable. But it wasn't. Don't damage properly, didn't block traffic, didn't interrupt shopping, didn't make noise, didn't even say anything until someone asked. He's not even a great player, they said. As if that your score count gives you a right to speak. Yeah. And now they cheer that Kaepernick is out of work, as he literally donates his earnings to feed people whose meals they're defunding. So yeah, the message from the NFL is, don't protest where we can see you.
Yes, very much so. And I mean, it's interesting, but it's not surprising, I guess, in a sense.
Oh, no, they're protecting our bottom line. Yeah.
What's interesting, I think, is that
they also took a lot of heat from dear leader Trump.
True. There's a couple teams that didn't go along with it, right?
Well, there's claims that the vote was unanimous.
Yes.
But then there's now been counterclaims to that.
Yeah, like the Jets said they will defy this claim, and they'll pay the fines for their players or whatever.
Which, congratulations to the Jets.
Yeah. I guess whatever.
Well, I mean, it's taking the stand that needs to be said. Mm. Like the idea that there isn't police brutality issues in the States is a complete farce. And the fact that these players are making a statement should be lauded.
Yeah.
Not like that makes them excellent people or something like that, but the fact that they're actually making a statement in public where it can be seen, when you want to shit on them just because they're making the statement.
Yeah.
There's sorry.
No, it's I don't know. It seems so hypocritical. Like I find myself feeling like, or thinking that the people who want to fight against this particular form of protest, or like enforce like a type of worship of the flag and the national anthem, don't really understand what their country was about.
No. They don't appreciate the actual need and the reasoning behind the Second Amendment.
Well, I think you're meaning First Amendment, not Second Amendment.
No, I mean the second.
Right to bear arms?
Yeah.
This protest has nothing to do with that.
No,
This
that's
is-
true,
This
but-
is a First Amendment protest.
Yeah.
Free speech.
And
Yeah.
I mean, technically the NFL can do whatever they want. They're
Yeah.
a private company. But I think that the fans and the organization are making a huge mistake and taking the wrong side of this debate.
Well,
myself.
it's just that it's funny that the same people that are saying, "Oh no, they shouldn't be protesting like that. Just shut up and play the football." How many of them were the same ones that were, part of the Tea Party and
Right.
you know, burning effigies of Obama and then chanting "lock her up" at the Trump rallies.
I mean,
yeah, it's kind of a different thing because you're right, because NFL is
yeah.
I don't even know what the NFL is. Is it like technically that one of those weird things? It's a non-profit for mass profit things.
no,
Like,
it's for profit.
it is a profit. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can
They just
remember.
have huge influence with the government.
Yeah.
And often they can leverage their staying in a city against the city
Yeah.
so that they can get stadium
For some reason, I thought there was someone who made that argument that they were like, they make massive a profit, but they claim to be a non-profit. At any rate, that's beside the point. It's the fact that
Isn't that the NCAA?
oh, maybe that's what I'm thinking of. I might have my sports ball all wrong, but
Yeah, tell me about it. I don't got that stuff right either.
but
yeah. There's too many goddamn leagues.
yeah.
So, sorry.
But it's just that I find it weird is that, like they're making a big deal. Oh, you can't protest, but yet they have to make sure everyone's got their, stand for the anthem and
Do
Shit.
what we tell you, otherwise you lose money.
yeah.
Corey, I wonder if these players were kneeling to protest whatever a new gun control law that made it more difficult, it did infringe on their Second Amendment rights, and they were gun nuts. They wanted no gun control laws, and that's why they were protesting. Would you feel the same?
I would feel, wow.
Like you wouldn't agree with them, but would you
Yeah,
feel that they
no.
should still be able to kneel and vote?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
Are you sure?
yeah,
Whether-
I'm reasonably sure.
How do you know you don't have biases?
Oh, I definitely have biases, but I'm reasonably sure I would agree with their right to protest. Interestingly enough, I think that if that were the case and they were protesting in favor of more guns on the streets, you wouldn't hear a peep out of the people who are currently outraged.
I feel like there's a little bit of an overlap. For some reason, there's some weird overlap in that demographic.
When is there? I agree with the right to protest and all that, but when is there like? I think of like NRA protests that occur after a school shooting or something like that. Like, is that maybe that should be allowed? I don't know, but at the same time, is it harmful?
I think that those are different arguments, right?
Strictly
I
speaking,
think you have to be able to do those protests despite the fact that they might be harmful to some degree.
Right.
well, the question of harm is whether or not it's what sort I want to use: physical harm versus inconvenience harm.
Well, I mean, look what's happening to Alex Jones, though, right? Like, like he spoke out against the Sandy Hook shootings, and now he's getting there's actually a lawsuit for the effects it's had on the people.
That keeps growing, actually.
Yeah, so that's an interesting kind of comparison.
I think that that's a slightly different tact, and that lawsuit actually might fail depending on
it probably will.
on the way
I think it will.
Depending on the way they word things, but it might slip into libel or slander territory.
Because that is a type of harm that can be proven in court.
Yeah, I suppose that like the way Alex approached it would have been different than say the NRA showing up at a gun protest. They wouldn't be like slandering the families and like the.
Oh, they might.
Maybe, but typically they're just talking about their right to bear arms and that this shouldn't prevent it and blah 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 blah.
I know,
that kind of thing.
A lot of people don't like to recognize it, but free speech is a nuanced issue.
Well, it is nuanced, right?
Because there are laws against certain types of speech. And they're
in Canada.
In the U.S., they still have slander laws and libel laws.
True.
So They do have these laws.
It's different law, yeah.
But the government can't take you to court for slander or libel, can they?
Well,
I think that's kind of the distinction.
it depends on.
That's a good point.
It's nuanced.
Yeah, but I just mean I've never heard of a case where the government took someone to court for slander or libel. It's always
You have
a
to
private
take them
concern.
yourself. The
Yeah,
person who was
that's right.
slandered.
Isn't Trump doing that?
I don't think currently.
Not as the government.
I don't think currently, but yeah, like there is nuance to these laws,
Yeah.
and I think that some
Fire
of what
in the theater, right?
yeah, well, actually, that's not against the law. Interestingly, like because
the nuances become tough, though. I guess
yeah,
is what
the
I'm
nuances
saying.
become tough. Exactly.
Like I wouldn't be anti the protest at all for the NFL, but at the same time, I do see like, I guess if I believed that this was somehow harmful to something, I don't know, like, you know, like would I be as accepting of it? I don't know.
I'm pro-protest in every form, but I'm also pro-counter-protest and you know, like I'm of the position that when protesting is the thing that's being done or marches or gatherings in public spaces, that's just once you get your permits, which is another interesting nuance to the free speech issue.
Yeah.
Then by all means have at it, even if I disagree with you vehemently.
So the torch wielding white supremacists should have been allowed to protest then.
They got their permits, but there should have been counter protests, which there were.
There were, yeah.
And the police, their real thing should be to keep the peace, not.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I agree
not
with that.
attack either side necessarily.
Yeah.
They definitely do that. Yeah, sometimes.
It wasn't so much the problem that there was a white supremacist rally / march. It was just that people started to make it violent.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
There was their march.
But one could argue their very concept is violent, though.
That's true.
You know what I mean? One could argue that kind of thing needs to be shut down because it is so dangerous. You know,
you could do that under the Canadian laws. Don't think
Canadian
American
laws you
would
could.
allow it.
Oh yeah, the Canadian laws you totally could.
That's like what's it? Karl Popper's. Yeah, it's Karl Popper's tolerance of intolerance paradox.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The idea that the more you tolerate intolerance, the less free your society becomes.
Well, that's just it, and that's the nuance of the free speech rights, right? You know?
There's a town in Germany, I believe it's one of the significant towns to the Third Reich, where they have a Nazi rally every year. The townspeople, they set up a donation or something for every meter that their rally goes. They donate a certain amount of money to a anti-fascism cause.
Nice.
I've heard of that,
Interesting.
but that instantly makes me go, wait a minute, because in Germany, all Nazi
Yeah, it's illegal. Like straight up illegal.
It might be Poland.
Okay, yeah. If it's a different country, then different rules. But like in Germany itself, all Nazi paraphernalia is.
But it also could be done in the guise of non-Nazi.
Yeah, like even in Poland,
dog whistle.
They don't use actual swastikas. They use a swastika-like symbol, and they call themselves this other thing. They're fucking Nazis, but they're this other thing. Thanks.
We're Nazis with an S.
Yeah, we're Nutzies, not Nazis.
Yeah.
So I guess, did we play out the NFL?
I think we totally sidestepped.
Well, no, I think that's relevant, right? Like about the right to do that and
protests
what it means
and whatnot.
I think ultimately it comes down to is the NFL caved to pressure from Trump.
Right, because last year didn't they kind of side with the players?
Sort of, yeah.
I think they caved to their bank, but or their wallets. Like really,
they're Trump supporters.
Yeah,
because honestly, like they did take an economic knock over this. So I mean, I think that's more.
One of my favorite memes that's been going around is that the NFL doesn't give a shit about who's beating their wives or who's committing crimes. they care about these guys kneeling on the field.
And that's where I think they just care about the profits. Obviously.
In the bottom line is they don't give a shit except for the bottom line.
Yeah, I honestly think this could have happened under Obama.
I also heard on a Libsyn podcast about podcasting for some reason that the NFL sued a church once for having an NFL Sunday, like playing football games at their church.
Yeah, well, of course, broadcast rights.
Yeah.
Yeah, the blackout.
It's a public screening.
So that's that's the NFL. I mean,
yeah. And I don't want to be completely cynical. Like there's obviously people within those organizations that are fantastic but I think as a whole, they have to be concerned about their self-preservation. So
yeah, it falls under the idea of protecting copyright, right?
Yeah.
They might have had something as simple as, well, hell, I don't know, broadcast anything to do with like NFL at all. Maybe there was a brand on one of the balls, but that's if you don't pursue your copyright, you can't keep your copyright.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Also, here I found it.
Oh,
Germantown tricks neo-Nazis into raising thousands of euros for anti-extremist charity.
Yeah, I had actually heard of that because I think Vice did a thing on it.
Wunsiedel in Bavaria.
In Bavaria?
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, they had basically had an involuntary walkathon, they called it. But yeah, so Nazis marching against Nazis.
That's interesting. Okay. Let's skip my story since I didn't read it anyway. We'll do some science with Lisa.
If you base medicine on science, you cure people. If you base the design of planes on science, they fly. If you base the design of rockets on science, they reach the moon. It works, bitches.
Yes, science!
If we base medicine on science, it kills people.
He really needs to enunciate that just a little bit better.
It cures people. That's what his weird Britishness was saying. Okay. This is an article from Science Daily. Daily egg consumption may reduce cardiovascular disease. Having an egg a day could reduce risk of stroke by 26%. Basically, this is a paper from a research group out of China. And it compared people who eat an egg a day or more, and finds that it could significantly reduce their risk of cardiovascular disease compared with eating no eggs. So it's quite a cool. I think just generally it's neat because it's the study that involved 500,000 people.
Holy shit!
500,000 people. So like in China, you can just get 500,000 people in your study. Like,
what the fuck?
It's really cool. It's not even retrospective. It's prospective, meaning they signed them up and then they monitored them.
Wow.
Like for a year, I think, do they have you? When it was. So it's a team of researchers from China and the UK led by Professor Lim Ming Li and Dr. Ken King Yu, from the School of Public Health, Peking University's Health Science Center. They used a data bank called the China Kadoorie Biobank. So it's an ongoing prospective study of around 5,512,891 adults aged between 30 and 79 from 10 different geographical regions in China. And so these participants were recruited between 2004 and 2008. And amongst many, many other things, they were asked about their frequency of egg consumption. So they cut out participants who had prior cancer or previous cardiovascular disease. So now their sample size was only down to just over 400,000. It was tiny.
Oh, God.
But they did have certain, that sounds like decent control. Like,
well, they had some exclusion criteria.
Right.
There. Yeah. So, they did some follow up. They found about 84,000 cases of cardiovascular disease and about 10,000 cardiovascular disease caused death. As well as 5,000 major coronary events. So, 13% of the participants reported daily egg consumption and 9% reported never or very rare egg consumption. Basically, analysis of the results showed that compared with people not consuming eggs, daily egg consumption was associated with lower risk of cardiovascular death overall. So, in particular, daily egg consumers up to 1 egg per day had a 26% lower risk of hemorrhagic stroke, the type of stroke with a higher prevalence rate in China than in high income countries, and a 28% lower risk of hemorrhagic stroke death, and an 18% lower risk of cardiovascular disease death. So, yeah. So basically they found a correlation between, eating at least an egg a day and lowered risk with cardiac events. So when
interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting. I actually went and got the actual paper because to me, even though it's a really large sample size, which is very good, for example, what if the people who tend to eat more eggs are the richer people who have better access to healthcare, or tend to have better exercise and better, maybe
because eggs can be expensive.
Well, maybe it's younger people who, but maybe it's younger people who eat eggs and not older people, and that's why you would get, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So I looked at the paper, and they did control for a great deal of, what's the word? Effect or here, hang on the paper right here. Where is it? No, where is it? Daily egg consumption associated. Here it is. They did control for a lot of different covariants. That's what they call them. So, for example, they controlled for, hang on. They controlled for age, sex. They controlled for their education level, household income, marital status, alcohol consumption, tobacco smoking, physical activity, BMI, waist-to-hip ratio, prevalent hypertension, use of aspirin, family history of CBD, intake of, okay, I'm not going to read it all. A lot of things.
Sounds pretty thorough.
So because when you have such a huge, so what you do, you can't, it's not like in advance, what is the effect of multivitamins on,
right.
But what you do is you see, well, can I see a trend? Do I see a trend with cardiovascular disease with multivitamin use? Okay, well, it's just noise. It's flat. No, okay. So that's not, so it doesn't matter if I throw that in. Okay. Do I see a trend with age? Oh yeah, more age equals, so then you kind of skew that out of your, you take that effect out of your results, and you don't, that effect gets canceled out. Right. So they did this analysis that way. So that's kind of what you need to do. They're basically leveraging statistics to do this, but there's so many variables. And obviously they've asked them a lot of stuff, but,
right.
I think it's really cool. Every time I see that a study like this, like some sort of big, what's this kind of demographic based study? Oh God, my words are failing.
Cohort?
No, this type of study where you do, you try to glean information from a group, like medical information from a group, based on statistics and this is all just based on surveys, not like they actually control the data or anything. I can't think of the word starts with an E. Anyways, when you do this kind of study, what you really want is large numbers, and you need to be able to try to
epidemiological.
Yes, that's the word. Yeah, that kind of study. So you really want to be able to leverage that kind of thing, but there's always that risk of causation and correlation being mixed up. But in this case, they seem to have controlled for a lot of things. And this is kind of the best kind of study you can do. But every time a study comes out of I remember reading a study coming out of Taiwan, and I was interested in, I can't even remember what I was interested in, but it had they all have 30,000 people or 100,000, 500,000 people in them. And it's just so amazing the amount, what they can leverage, with those kind of volumes of people. And it's really interesting epidemiological work coming out of that area.
That is interesting.
Right now.
Especially the only reason I know the word epidemiological is because I read a book, part of a book called The China Study, which argues in favor of vegetarianism or veganism, and discusses some of these broader studies and comparisons between populations and disease that comes out of people who have eaten in China, who have eaten meat or who have had non-meat diets.
Right.
Which there's a lot of problems within that particular book, but this seems like a pretty good study. I don't know if we can draw permanent for sure conclusions.
Well, I
to
mean,
anything,
it's always that you need to do more research, blah, blah, blah. But, I mean,
Right.
that's a huge cohort. That's really
That
interesting.
is, yeah.
I mean, what you really want, your standard would be some sort of like, prospective clinical trial type of thing that would actually like decide people's diets.
Right.
I was listening to a really interesting, revisionist history episode where apparently they did this in the 70s with people living in mental institutions in, I can't remember which state, Ohio. Yeah. And this data.
Is that one of the new ones?
It's actually, I think, the last one in the last season because I had to catch up with season 2. But but basically they were looking, this guy who's running the study was looking for fat correlating with heart disease.
Right.
And the data never panned that out. And when they reanalyzed the data decades later, they realized actually no, the dietary fat had nothing to do with heart disease. The only correlation they could find was with sugar. So anyway, it was very interesting.
Yeah, I think I remember that one actually.
Yeah, it's a good one. Check it out.
They had to go into the scientist's
basement
to find his old records.
Well, the guy was dead. It was his son going into the basement to find them. Yeah. So, yeah, go listen to another podcast, everyone. Not this one. Go listen. It's really good.
Listen to this one first.
Oh, yeah. Well, sorry. First listen to this one, then you can go listen to Revisionist History, which is really good. And there's a new season out. It's so exciting.
It's already got 2 episodes and I'm behind. I haven't listened to either.
They're quick, though. They're like 40 minutes or something. And on 1.5, they're like 25 minutes.
That's true.
Freak.
They go by fast.
I don't know how you can handle it. Don't listen to this podcast or any podcast at 1.5 speed. It's just weird.
It took me a very long time to get used to it. Like I said,
because it's wrong.
Your ears aren't accustomed to it.
No, because it's wrong.
I feel like I understand it just as well.
No, I don't mean that you're not understanding. I just mean that it's morally, ethically.
It's just ethically wrong.
Wrong.
You're just a bad person for doing it.
Correct. Yes. That's what I'm saying, Cory.
Fair.
Thanks.
That's fair.
For understanding.
Yeah. No, that's fair. All right. That's where we'll close the Shift to Reason Radio. With me being a bad person.
Awful.
Objectively bad. For everything else, you can check out the show notes at thebrainstormpodcast.com and our website, brainstormblog.net. Thanks to our financial supporters, Stephanie, Zach, the Utah Outcasts, Bassett, Will, Aaron, Daryl, Destin Sucks, Bob Glenn, Destin Doesn't Suck That Much, Magnus, several species of small furry animals gathered together in a cave, Positively Skeptical, Rob, Julie, Chris, and Larry. If you want to join them and help the show grow, then you can do that at patreon.com/brainstormpodcast. Or you can buy our stuff at tpublic.com/stores/brainstorm-podcast-gear. You can join us every second week when we broadcast live on brainstormradio.net. Our next show is on June 8th, and our guest will be Mandisa Thomas, founder and president of Black Nonbelievers. Thanks again to Bob for joining us, though he's not likely ever going to hear this. You can find his stuff at link to be determined.
He's on Twitter.
He's on the Twitter. Look for Bob Nygaard.
If you Google him, he's everywhere.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
No, I actually did Google him while we were talking.
He has a lot of places where you can find him. Thanks to Dave for our intro music. Thanks to Aaron Rabbi from the Embrace the Void podcast for doing the new voiceover. You can find his stuff at voidpod.com. Thanks to Alex Capper-Murdoch for doing the voiceover for our ads, and thanks to Jason Camo for our outro music. You can find his stuff at aloststateofmind.com. All music played is either with permission or under the SOCAN license to play. For more information on SOCAN, you can check out the music license info page on our website, brainstormblog.net. Remember to give us a rating, a thumbs up, or a fave on your podcatcher of choice. Join our Facebook group, like our page, follow us on Twitter, share the show, and spread the word. For live listeners, stick around for the after show. You can go to brainstormafterhours.com and listen to the bonus content before it goes patron only. Thanks for listening, and remember, the truth matters.
This is an opinion-based podcast. Each person on the podcast is responsible for their own opinions, and those opinions don't necessarily reflect the views of the rest of the panel, any guests, or anyone associated with the people on the podcast, such as spouses, partners, children, other family members, friends, or employers. No one person speaks for the podcast, with the possible exception of Cory, and he doesn't speak for anyone else on the show. The Brainstorm podcast does not represent the views of our sponsors.
We just wanted to say thanks to everyone who listens to us, shares the show, gives us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher, or supports us through Patreon and Gumroad. We don't have a lot of interactions with our listeners, but what we have had proves that we attract some of the best people around. Smart, kind, and cool. An audience truly worthy of the titles hardcore and woo-free. Thanks for helping us make the world a smarter place.